There is a nest in your yard right now that looks finished. The cup is woven tight, the lining is soft, the location is sheltered from wind and hidden from the street. Maybe you watched it get built. A few days of a bird flying back and forth with grass stems and moss, and the occasional strand of dryer lint pulled from somewhere down the block, shaping it with her own body until the proportions were exact. You stopped checking on it as often once it looked done. By every visible measure, it was perfect. And there is a real chance that in a few days, it will be empty, not because anything happened to it, but because the bird who built it simply left. Most people assume abandonment means something went wrong in a way you would be able to see. A predator got close. The weather turned. The nest got knocked from its branch. But the reality is far stranger than that, because the majority of nest abandonments happen to nests that are completely intact in locations that look entirely safe, for reasons that have nothing to do with what you can observe from your porch. Welcome back to the hidden mind of birds. By the end of this, you are going to understand why a bird will spend 4 days building something flawless and then walk away from it without a backward glance. Stay until the end, because the last reason we cover is not about danger at all. It is about a kind of calculation happening inside that bird's body that most people never imagine a bird is capable of making. Start with the nest itself. You have watched a robin or a wren work on one before the back and forth flights, the beat packing mud or grass into place, the way the bird turns in tight circles inside the cup to shape it against her own body. It takes days. It costs enormous energy. A bird building a nest is burning calories she could be spending on almost anything else. So when she leaves that nest empty, your instinct is to assume catastrophe. Something must have killed her or scared her permanently. But here's what is actually happening in your yard far more often than catastrophe. The bird is still alive, still nearby, and she made a decision. Stay with me here, because this is the part that changes how you see every empty nest you have ever found. Researchers at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology have spent decades studying nest fate in backyard and woodland songbirds, and one of their clearest findings is that abandonment is not usually a single dramatic event. It is a response to information. A bird builds her nest based on the conditions she can assess in the moment: the cover, the height, the distance from the ground, the density of the surrounding branches. But she keeps assessing after the nest is built. And if new information arrives that changes the math, she acts on it immediately, before she has invested anything irreversible. This is the first thing most people miss. A finished nest, with no eggs in it yet, is not a commitment. It is a draft. A female house wren, for example, will sometimes build 2 or 3 nests in a single season before laying in any of them, sometimes in the same yard, sometimes in nest boxes just a few feet apart. She is not confused. She is not failing. She is comparing. And if a male shows up at one site with a weaker song, or if she notices a squirrel running the fence line near a nest box more than once in a week, she moves to the second nest she already has waiting, and the first one sits there looking perfect, untouched, for you to find and wonder about. What this means for your yard is this: that abandoned nest you found in the holly bush in May might not represent a failure at all. It might represent a bird who looked at 2 good options and chose the better one, and the one you found was simply the option she did not take. There is something worth sitting with in that. We tend to read an empty nest as a small tragedy. Sometimes it is something else entirely, evidence of a standard being applied. But not every abandonment is a comparison. Some of them are a response to something the bird detected that you did not. Pay attention to this one, because most people get the mechanism backward. You would assume a predator has to actually attack a nest to cause abandonment. Often, it never gets close. A study published in the Journal of Avian Biology, tracking predator activity near songbird nests, found that the mere presence of a known nest predator, a snake, a jay, a chipmunk, moving repeatedly through the territory, was enough to trigger abandonment in species like chickadees and titmice, even when the nest itself was never touched. The bird is not reacting to an attack. She is reacting to a pattern. She has been watching the same predator pass through 3 times in 4 days, and she draws a conclusion. This location has been found. A black-capped chickadee will do something specific in this situation that is easy to miss if you do not know to look for it. Instead of fleeing outright, she will reduce her visits to the nest first. Fewer trips, shorter stays, more time spent watching from a distance before approaching. Researchers call this behavior a form of risk assessment, the bird essentially running a cost-benefit calculation on every single approach. If the pattern of danger continues, the visits taper further, and eventually they stop altogether. From the outside, it looks sudden. From the bird's side, it was a gradual withdrawal that had been building for days. The Carolina wren does something similar, though with an added layer. Because wrens often nest close to human structures, porch eaves, hanging planters, garage shelving, they are also tracking human movement patterns as a variable. A wren that has tolerated a household's normal coming and going for 2 weeks can abandon a nest within a single day if that pattern changes unexpectedly. A new dog in the yard, a ladder left near the nest site, a door that starts swinging open at a new hour. It is not that the new thing is necessarily more dangerous. It is that it is unpredictable, and unpredictability is, to a nesting bird, very close to the same thing as danger. Think about that for a moment. A bird capable of distinguishing between a predator who passed through once and a predator who has developed a habit. Bird keeping count. This is the part that changes the way you think about your own presence in your yard. You are not invisible to the birds nesting near your house. You are a tracked variable. Every bird raising young within sight of your windows has, in some sense, been quietly studying your habits the way you have been studying hers, and what reads to you as nothing moving the grill, adding a wind chime, letting the side gate bang twice in one afternoon, can read to her as the pattern breaking. Stay with this, because what comes next is something even most long-time birdwatchers do not know about. There is a third category of abandonment that has nothing to do with predators or comparison shopping. It is physiological, and it happens inside the female's own body before a single egg is laid. Egg formation is enormously expensive. A female songbird has to draw calcium and protein reserves to build each egg, and in species like the eastern bluebird and the tree swallow, researchers studying clutch failure have found that females in poor body condition recovering from a late cold snap or nesting in a season when insect prey was scarce will sometimes build a complete nest and then simply fail to develop eggs at all, or stop after laying only 1 or 2 when a full clutch would normally be 4 or 5. The nest is not abandoned because anything went wrong with it. It is abandoned because the bird's own body told her, partway through, that she did not have the resources to finish what she started. There is something almost unbearably practical about this. We like to imagine wild creatures as driven entirely by instinct, locked into finishing whatever they begin. But a bird in poor condition will cut her losses. She will leave a structurally sound nest, sometimes with an egg already inside it, because continuing would cost more than her own survival could absorb. It is not failure in the way we would use the word. It is a decision made by a body keeping score. The tree swallow does something similar, though the trigger is timing rather than reserves. Tree swallows depend on flying insects to feed their young, and a cold snap during the first week after eggs are laid can suppress insect activity enough that researchers tracking swallow colonies have documented females abandoning otherwise viable clutches mid-incubation, well before the eggs would have failed on their own. The bird is not waiting to find out whether the food will come back. She is reading the weather as data and acting on the forecast, not the outcome. What this means for your yard is this. A string of unusually cold mornings in early spring, the kind that barely registered to you beyond reaching for a jacket, can be the entire reason a nest you were watching goes quiet a few days later. Nothing visible failed. The math simply changed. And then there is the reason that very few people ever consider, because it requires thinking about the nest the way the bird does not as a home, but as a single move in the much longer game stretching across the whole breeding season. I have saved this one for last, because it belongs last. Many backyard species, particularly American robins and eastern bluebirds, are capable of raising 2 or even 3 broods in a single year if conditions allow. That means every individual nest is being weighed against nests that have not happened yet. If a female senses, even faintly, that this particular attempt is compromised, a slightly exposed branch, a mate who has been less attentive than expected, a season running later than ideal, she may abandon early rather than pour weeks of energy into young that have a reduced chance of fledging energy. She would rather hold in reserve for a second attempt under better conditions a few weeks later. This is the part that is easy to miss entirely. The empty nest you are looking at might not represent a bird who lost something. It might represent a bird playing a longer season than the one you can see, choosing to protect her capacity for June over her investment in April. There is a kind of intelligence in that most people never credit a bird with having. Not foresight in the way we would describe a person planning, but something functionally close to it. A body and a set of instincts tuned by millions of years of exactly this kind of arithmetic, run silently, continuously. Every single day a nest sits unfinished in your yard. So the next time you find one of these nests tucked in the hedge, woven into the hanging basket on your porch, sitting in a box you put up with real hope, look at it differently than you did before. What you are looking at is not a failure and not a small tragedy waiting for your sympathy. It is the visible remainder of a decision made by a creature running calculations you cannot see. About predators she has been tracking longer than you have noticed her, about her own body's reserves, about a second chance she may already be building somewhere else in your yard right now. The nest looks finished. It looks perfect. And that was never really the question she was answering. Tell me in the comments, have you ever found an abandoned nest in your yard and wondered what happened to the bird who built it? Did you ever see her again nearby? I read every one. I will see you in the next one.